You wake up one day and realize you're drowning in possibilities, not the kind that feels like opportunity, the kind that feels like paralysis. You've done everything right. The degree, the career trajectory, the relationship that looks perfect in photos. And yet there's this gnawing sensation, this vertigo that won't leave you alone. It's not anxiety about failure. It's something worse. It's the terror of succeeding at a life that was never yours to begin with. The garden closes behind you and you find yourself alone in the desert. This experience isn't rare. It's not a sign that something is wrong with you. In fact, it's a sign that something is finally right. More than 150 years ago, a Danish philosopher named Søren Kierkegaard gave this sensation a name. He called it angst. Not the everyday nervousness you get before a presentation, not the worry that keeps you up at night. Angst is something far more fundamental. It's the vertigo of absolute freedom. It's the dread that arises when you suddenly understand that you are free, truly free, and that freedom is terrifying. You see, we're all born into what Kierkegaard called the aesthetic stage. Picture it as a garden with walls so high you can't see over them. Everything is provided. The meaning is already decided. Your family has expectations. Your culture has a script. Your society has a timeline. Follow the script, hit the milestones, and you're guaranteed to feel like you belong. The rules are clear. The path is paved. The garden is comfortable. It's safe. It's everything a child needs. But you're not a child anymore. And at some point, maybe a sudden crisis, maybe a quiet Tuesday morning, something cracks. You glimpse what's beyond the walls, and you can't unsee it. That glimpse, that crack in the facade, is the expulsion. It doesn't happen to you. You're not kicked out by some external force. You expel yourself. Your own consciousness, your own growing awareness that this garden is also a prison, becomes the serpent in your story. And once you know the truth, you can never go back. The gate closes, the comfort becomes suffocating, and you find yourself in the desert, alone, free, terrified. But here's what most people do when they hit the desert. They panic. They try to build another garden. They hunt for the next parasite. Maybe it's travel. Maybe it's chasing experiences like they're collecting proof of a life well lived. Maybe it's endless consumption, the belief that the next purchase, the next achievement, the next validation will finally fill the void. They scroll, they compare, they perform. They do everything except what they actually need to do, which is stop running, stop filling. Stop pretending the desert can be paved over with more distractions. Others take a different approach. They get tired of the chaos and seek out a new master. A guru, a self-help system, a political ideology, a rigid religion. They trade one garden for another, thinking that this time, if they just follow the rules harder, if they just believe more intensely, if they just obey the authority figure more completely, then the emptiness will finally go away. They exchange the garden of their childhood for the garden of their choice. But it's still a garden, still a cage, still someone else's design. Kierkegaard saw through both of these escapes. He understood that the real path wasn't back to the garden, and it wasn't into another garden. The real path was something almost nobody wants to hear. The real path was deeper into the desert, deeper into the very thing causing the pain. Because the pain itself, that's the signal. That's the compass pointing you toward who you actually are. Here's the uncomfortable truth they don't tell you. The paradise you've been exiled from wasn't actually paradise. It was a comfortable prison. And your exile is the greatest mercy that could ever happen to you. It's the forcing of your own becoming. It's the event that transforms you from a passenger in your own life into the author of it. But to understand why, you need to understand the architecture of the stages Kierkegaard described. You need to see exactly how the parasite works, why it fails, and what lies beyond it. Let's start with the aesthetic stage. This is the world you were born into. This is the matrix of comfort that's been humming in the background of your entire existence. The aesthetic person, and there's some of this in all of us lives for what feels good in the moment. for what's interesting, for what stimulates. He's not bound by morality or duty. Those feel like chains. He's bound by sensation, by novelty, by the endless pursuit of the next interesting thing. His God is the impulse. His law is pleasure. Think about what that actually looks like in the modern world. It's your phone. It's the infinite scroll. It's the dopamine hit of the notification, the like, the comment from a stranger that proves for just a moment that you exist. It's the weekend trip booked to escape the mundane Tuesday. It's the relationship you stay in because it's comfortable, even though you know it's hollow. It's the job you tolerate because the paycheck funds your escapes. It's the entire system designed to keep you distracted, stimulated, never quite satisfied, but never quite empty enough to face the silence. The aesthetic paradise is the paradise of the consumer, and you are the consumed. The genius of this stage, the reason it persists, is that it works, for a while. The pleasure is real. The distraction is effective. You can spend years, decades, even in this paradise, chasing experiences, collecting moments, performing a life that looks enviable from the outside. Your feed is curated. Your story is polished. Your mask fits so well you almost forget it's a mask. But here's the mechanism of collapse. Pleasure is self-terminating. The thing that delighted you last month no longer delights you today. You need more, stronger, faster, newer. The distraction that worked becomes boring. The relationship that distracted you becomes suffocating. The escape that numbed you requires an ever-increasing dose. And one day, maybe gradually, maybe all at once, you realize you've been running in a circle. The music stops. The lights go out. And you're left in the silence with yourself. Alone, with no one to impress. No one to distract you. No one to tell you who you're supposed to be. That's the moment of the fall. That's the expulsion. That's when the aesthetic paradise reveals itself as what it always was, a delay, a postponement of the real question. The real question isn't, how do I feel good? The real question is, who am I? And that question can't be answered in the garden. It can only be answered in the desert. But the mind doesn't want to stay in that desert for long. It's too uncomfortable. So what happens next? What happens is the ethical stage. This is when you grow up. Or at least when you try to. Confronted with the despair of endless pleasure-seeking, you make a choice. You decide to build something real. You pursue meaning through duty, through responsibility, through moral law. You might get married. You commit. You build a career. You create stability. You exchange the pursuit of pleasure for the pursuit of purpose. You become, as Kierkegaard put it, the ethical man. And on the surface, this looks like progress. It looks like maturity. You're no longer a slave to impulse. You're disciplined. You have a code. You follow rules. You keep your promises. You're reliable. You're respectable. You've created order out of chaos. You've built a well in the desert. This well is your work, your relationships, your identity in the community. And for a time, this works too. The stability feels like meaning. The duty feels like purpose. The rules feel like freedom, because at least now you know what's expected of you. The danger here is subtle. The ethical person can spend his entire life believing he's found the answer. He follows the rules so carefully, so perfectly, that he begins to believe the rules themselves are the point. He becomes righteous. He judges others by the law. He measures his worth by his adherence to the code. And because he's effective at following the code, because he's respectable and successful by society's standards, the world validates him. You've made it, they tell him. You've found your purpose. You've built your life correctly. But there's a crack in this stage too, a crack that Kierkegaard saw with brutal clarity. Rules don't answer the deepest questions. Discipline doesn't heal the deepest wounds. The ethical man can follow every law, fulfill every obligation, achieve every goal, and still wake up at 3 a.m. with an inexplicable sense that something is missing. Because the laws are external, they're inherited. They're the echo of what others decided for you. And deep in your soul, You know the difference between living someone else's law and discovering your own. You know the difference between following the script and writing your own. There's also the matter of suffering, of absurdity, of death, of the fundamental strangeness and incomprehensibility of existence. The ethical stage, with all its logic and rules and responsibility, has no answer for these. The good man dies the same death as the corrupt man. The honest businessman faces the same meaninglessness as the vagabond. The law cannot save you from the void. The duty cannot make sense of the senseless. And that's when the ethical stage begins to collapse. Not because it wasn't good, but because good isn't enough. There's something deeper. Something the intellect can't calculate and society can't teach. That something is angst. This is where we arrive at the core of what Kierkegaard was trying to communicate. Angst isn't fear. Everyone confuses these. Fear is always fear of something specific. You fear poverty. You fear rejection. You fear failure. You fear death. Fear has an object. Angst has no object. Angst is the dread of nothing. Or more precisely, angst is the consciousness of infinite possibility. It's standing on the edge of a cliff and realizing you could jump. You won't, but you could. That possibility, the knowledge of your own radical freedom, is what creates angst. Picture yourself alone in a room. You're not in danger. No one is threatening you. You're safe, and yet, suddenly, the walls feel very close. Your heart races, not because anything external has changed, but because you've become aware of your own freedom. You're aware that you could leave this room, that you're staying by choice. And in that awareness, in that consciousness of your own freedom, something shifts. Something terrifying and exhilarating at once awakens. That's angst. It's the vertigo of freedom. It's the realization that you are the author of your life, and that authorship cannot be delegated. You cannot hide behind the rules forever. You cannot blame the system forever. You cannot say, I had no choice forever. Because deep down, you know you did have a choice. You know you always have a choice. And that knowledge, that radical and inescapable knowledge of your own freedom, is what creates the dread. Kierkegaard understood something that most philosophies miss. Angst is not a problem to be solved. It's a calling to be answered. It's not a symptom of dysfunction. It's a symptom of becoming conscious. It's the growing pain of a soul learning to birth itself. The question isn't how to eliminate angst. The question is how to respond to it, how to use it, how to let it transform you. Because here's the secret. People who never feel angst are people who never truly wake up. They're comfortable in the garden, or comfortable in the cage of the ethical stage. They've outsourced their becoming to the system. They've said, someone else will tell me who I am, and I will believe them. And as long as that system works, as long as the distraction is sufficient, they can maintain that bargain. But you're reading this. You're listening to this. And that means somewhere, at some level, you've already started to feel it. The crack, the wake-up call. The angst. And angst, if you let it work on you, if you stop trying to numb it, or escape it, or rationalize it away, angst becomes the greatest teacher you will ever have. This is the point where the conventional paths end. This is where self-help books and life coaches and therapists and gurus cannot follow you. Because the next stage, the stage that lies beyond the aesthetic and the ethical, cannot be taught. It can only be lived. It can only be chosen, and it requires something that reason cannot provide and that society cannot authorize. It requires the leap. Kierkegaard called it the leap of faith. But don't let the word faith fool you. He wasn't talking about religious faith in the traditional sense. He wasn't talking about believing in something you can't see or prove. He was talking about something far more radical. He was talking about the act of choosing meaning in the face of meaninglessness, of creating yourself in the face of a universe that offers you no instruction manual, of betting your entire life on something that cannot be guaranteed, justified, or rationalized. The leap is an act of existential courage. It's the moment you stop looking for external permission to become who you are. You stop waiting for the system to validate you. You stop seeking the proof. You stop demanding the map, and you choose. You choose a value. You choose a love. You choose a cause. You choose something that matters to you, not because it's profitable, not because it's respectable, not because society tells you it should matter, but because something deep inside you recognizes it as real. When you make the leap, everything changes, not your circumstances. You don't suddenly become rich or famous or surrounded by people who understand you. You don't get all the answers or achieve permanent happiness. What changes is internal. What changes is your relationship to your own life. You stop being a passenger. You become the driver. You stop being a character in someone else's story. You become the author of your own. The first step of making the leap is embracing the absurd. This sounds darker than it is. What I mean is this. You stop demanding that the universe justify itself to you. You stop asking, why was I born? What is my purpose? What does it all mean? You accept that these questions might not have answers that come from outside you. The universe doesn't owe you meaning. The world doesn't owe you a purpose. Death will come. Suffering will come. And none of it will make sense from a rational perspective, and that's okay. In fact, that's liberation, because in the moment you stop waiting for the universe to hand you meaning, in the moment you accept that you might have to create it yourself, you become free to actually do that. The absence of inherent meaning is permission. The silence of the cosmos is not rejection, it's an invitation. It's the universe saying, you're on your own. What will you do with that? The second step is choosing with what Kierkegaard called infinite passion. This doesn't mean choosing randomly or impulsively. It means when you choose totally, completely, with your whole being. Not halfway, not tentatively, not with one foot already looking for the exit. You choose a principle, a love, a project, a cause, and you say, this is what I'm betting on. This is what I'm building my life around. I don't know if it will work. I don't have proof that this will bring me happiness or success, but I'm choosing it anyway. And I'm choosing it with everything I have. This is radically different from the way most people approach their lives. Most people dabble. They keep their options open. They hedge their bets. They stay ready to switch to Plan B the moment Plan A gets uncomfortable. They never fully commit to anything because commitment feels like a loss of freedom. But Kierkegaard understood the paradox. It's only through total commitment that you actually become free. It's only by choosing one thing with infinite passion that you escape the paralysis of infinite possibility. The choice itself matters less than the commitment. Someone might choose to build a business. Another might choose to raise a family. Another might choose to pursue art. Another might choose to serve a community. The specifics aren't the point. The point is the totality of the commitment. The point is that you've chosen something that matters to you. And you're living that choice, not someday, not when conditions are perfect, but now, today, in this very moment. The third step is the daily practice of living that choice even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Because this is where most people fail. They make the leap in a moment of inspiration. They feel the clarity, they see the vision, and then Tuesday comes. And it's raining. And they're tired, and the old patterns are so comfortable. And the voice says, maybe you were wrong. Maybe you should go back to the old way. And in that moment, the moment when nobody is watching, when there's no audience, when there's no external consequence for giving up, that's when the leap is either real or it's just fantasy. The leap is only real if you live it in the silence. If you keep choosing it when no one will ever know. If you keep building it even when the progress is invisible. If you keep practicing it even when it feels futile. This is the actual work. This is where the transformation happens. Not in the moment of realization. In the thousand small moments after. In the daily yes to what you've chosen despite all the reasons to say no. This is faith, not belief, not certainty, but the willingness to bet your life on something without a guarantee. The willingness to be faithful to your own becoming. And here's what's remarkable. When you actually do this, something shifts. Not immediately, not miraculously, but gradually, you discover something that the aesthetic stage could never provide, and that the ethical stage could never explain. You discover peace, not the peace of comfort, not the peace of certainty, but the peace that comes from being aligned with your own truth, from being the author of your own law. Kierkegaard had an image for this. He called such a person the Knight of Faith. And the most startling thing about the Knight of Faith, the thing that makes his existence almost invisible to the world, is that he looks completely normal. He pays his taxes. He takes the bus. He might work an ordinary job. He doesn't levitate. He doesn't glow. He faces the same difficulties as everyone else. His life isn't easier. In some ways it's harder because he's not distracting himself anymore. He's not numbing himself anymore. He's feeling everything fully and choosing anyway. But internally, this is where the difference becomes absolute internally. He possesses something the world cannot shake. He possesses the knowledge that he is the creator of his own meaning. He possesses the knowledge that he is free, truly free, not in the sense of having no responsibilities, but in the sense of having chosen his responsibilities. Not in the sense of having unlimited options, but in the sense of having committed totally to his choice. He lives simultaneously in the finite world of duties and relationships and ordinary Tuesday mornings, and in the infinite world of meaning and purpose that he himself has created. This is the promise. This is the transformation. This is what awaits you on the other side of the leap. But I need to be clear about something. This is not a promise of happiness. The Knight of Faith is not perpetually joyful. He suffers. He doubts. He faces failure. He encounters meaninglessness and absurdity constantly. But he's equipped to face it. He faces it as the author of his life, not as a victim of it. He faces it as someone who has chosen his own meaning, not as someone waiting for external meaning to be handed to him. The transformation happens in the reframing. The same desert that looked like exile when you were in the garden now looks like freedom. The same solitude that felt like abandonment when you were in the ethical stage now feels like power. The same absurdity that produced angst now produces clarity. Because you've shifted from asking, "What does the world owe me?" to asking, "What do I owe myself?" From "Why was I abandoned?" to "How do I create?" This is the alchemical transformation that Kierkegaard was describing. This is how suffering becomes strength. This is how exiling becomes liberation. And now we return to the title. You were exiled from the paradise. And you should thank God for it, because the paradise was a cage. Because the exile forced you to stop being a consumer of meaning and to become a creator of it. Because the loss of the comfortable prison is the only thing that could ever wake you up. You can spend your entire life angry at your exile, bitter about the comfort you lost, resentful of the freedom that was forced upon you. You can spend your life trying to rebuild the garden, chasing the next distraction, the next guru, the next system that promises to make you whole. You can spend your life trapped in the ethical stage, following all the rules so perfectly that you convince yourself the rules are the point. You can do all of this. Many do. Or you can thank the exile. You can thank the crisis. You can thank the moment your paradise cracked and you saw through it. You can thank the angst. You can thank the vertigo. You can thank it all because it was the midwife of your becoming. It was the event that transformed you from a creature living someone else's life into a creator of your own. This is the final stage. This is the stage most people never reach. This is the stage where you stop seeking external validation and start seeking internal truth. This is the stage where you stop asking permission to be and you simply are. Where you stop waiting for the right time and you start building now. Where you stop demanding guarantees and you start leaping anyway. The Knight of Faith doesn't have all the answers, but he doesn't need them, because he knows that the questions themselves were the wrong starting point. The right starting point is this: I am here. I am free. I will choose what to do with that freedom. I will create meaning in the face of meaninglessness. I will build a life that is mine, not society's, Not my parents, not my cultures, but mine. And I will do this every single day, especially on the days when I want to give up and go back to the garden. This is the promise of the exile. This is the gift of the expulsion. This is the secret that lies waiting for you in the desert. And it all begins with a choice. It all begins with deciding that the comfort of the garden wasn't worth the prison it created. That the rules of the ethical stage, while useful, are not your salvation. That the angst you feel, the vertigo, the dread, the freedom, this is not something to escape. This is something to embrace, because on the other side of that embrace is your own life. Your own meaning, your own law, your own becoming. This is what it means to have been exiled from paradise, and why you should spend the rest of your life grateful for it. Now I want to hear from you. Which paradise have you been exiled from? What garden did you have to leave behind? And more importantly, how are you building your own meaning in the desert? Share in the comments. Because your story matters, your becoming matters. And there are others in this desert who need to know they're not alone in their exile. Stay with me, because this is just the beginning of the journey.